All right. Well, how go there? Do a little something on machines. I'm actually going to cover it a little differently than we would have had we normal class today. And that's okay. You might enjoy it more. It'll be a brief review, though. So here we are, note 7. If you jump over to page 25, I'm not really going to get crazy with the details here, but it's worth learning about machines because they're everywhere. Nearly everything you use is made up of these simple machines and makes your life easier in many ways. So here we go. Let's talk about how is work made easier. That's really what a machine does. So let me set something straight right away. People sometimes make the mistake of thinking that a machine does work for you or a machine multiplies work. Does a machine multiply work? Well, we're going to revisit that question, but let me say it right now so you're clear on it. The answer is no. The answer is definitively no. And that question will make a little more sense in a couple of minutes. But let's talk about what machines actually do. First thing, the purpose of machines. Why do we have machines at all? Because they provide a benefit. So there are a few different benefits, actually 3 main benefits from machines. If we had done this in the notes and we got all mathematical with it, the Regents course only covers what's called mechanical advantage. Now, because we're doing it briefly, actually we can spend a little time on the disadvantage as well, mechanical disadvantage, which is interestingly a benefit of a machine as well. So basically, how can you make work easier? Work, we've done a whole bunch on, lifting something. Very common type of work that we often use machines for is lifting stuff. So one way you can make work easier is by redirecting the force. So redirecting, the or is in there because we're going to have something else with the force. But redirecting the force, for example, if you try to lift up a heavy crate, you can only get so far. Maybe you have to get it up onto a high shelf. But if you had a pulley attached to the ceiling, lifting that crate would still require you lift its full weight. However, it would be easier because you've now redirected it to, instead of you lifting up, the rope pulling it up, and you get to pull down. Your body can pull down a rope over and over and over and over. You can only lift up as far as your arms can reach. So one way to make work easier is to redirect your force. Usually, though, when people talk about machines, they talk about mechanical advantage, which is reducing the force. Reducing the force. So that's really the main one that people like to think about. We'll put a little star on that one. So reducing the force. And that means you pull, but you don't have to pull that hard. One example of this that most of us don't have any experience with, but maybe your parents have at some point, is power steering. One of the things in your car is when you steer, you really don't have to turn the wheel very hard. Once upon a time, there was no power steering, and you had to get some muscles there to turn that wheel. So that's an example of a machine reducing the force that you need to apply. Okay, there's another benefit, and I'm going to add that one in here because we are talking qualitatively today for the most part. So the other benefit is actually quickening that's the right way to say it. Let's say quickening the motion. And so quickening the motion. I know that's a little bit of a tough thing to read right there. But just for you, and not so much a testable circumstance, but as you move on in the world, machines that reduce the force are known as this one right here, reducing the force. Those are machines that provide a mechanical advantage, a little A there, and machines that quicken the motion. Instead, you would call those mechanical disadvantage. And that's still a benefit, of course. It's called mechanical disadvantage because of the number that results, a small number rather than a big number. But it's actually a benefit up here because if you need to quicken the motion of something, quicken the motion of whatever it is that needs to be moved, well, then you've provided a benefit. So the three benefits: redirecting the force, reducing the force, or quickening the motion. However, machines always come with a cost. Not a benefit, but a cost. And this is kind of where we're getting into this whole multiplying work business. Comes at a cost. First off, the machine must act over a greater distance. Now, let's be very clear. That greater distance specifically goes with mechanical advantage. It must act over a greater distance, which usually is slow. It must act over a greater distance, which usually is slow. Now, the one I would not have told you about in class, other than like conversation on the sideboard, is this one. This mechanical disadvantage, but we can talk about it now. In this case, the cost is that it actually acts over a smaller distance, but the cost for mechanical disadvantage is you must provide a great force. And that one is actually going to connect to Lab 7.3 that you do today. So if you want the mechanical advantage of reducing the force, of basically making it easier to pull something, well then you have to act over a greater distance. A simple example of this is a ramp. You know, if you want to go upstairs to get from one floor to the next, or to enter a building, to go up the stairs, it requires some more force, but you get there in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. If you instead use a ramp, the ramp is a much greater distance, but it's a much lower force. So if your leg strength or body issues or in a wheelchair, whatever it is, it's much easier to go up a ramp. It requires less force. There's the mechanical advantage, but the cost is you have to go over a greater distance, which means it's slower. So if you're really trying to get into a building, up the steps is quicker if you're capable. The ramp is always going to be slower. You know, you could race your siblings. One of you takes the stairs, the other one takes the ramp. The stairs will win, as long as you're able-bodied. Now, another example of that actually is a screw. If I hand you a screw and I say, you know, push it into the wall, and you just push, you're going to have trouble. The screw only has to move, let's say it's an inch screw, it only has to move an inch to get into the wall. However, it requires a huge force. So what can we do? You can turn it instead. And if you turn it, if you add up the total amount of turning you do, it's way more than an inch. There's your greater distance, but it also required much less force. In fact, you were able to get it into the wall. All right. So this, the other one, the mechanical disadvantage, I'm going to let you flesh that one out in the lab. You'll see. Now, there's a third cost. So one cost is if it's mechanical advantage, you got this greater distance. A second cost is if it's mechanical disadvantage, meaning the motion goes quickly, well, you have to provide a greater force. You'll see. Actually, I'll give you an example of that. Is anything that's held out at a distance. Let's see here. If you ever try to pick something up with a straight arm, something that's heavy, grab it, keep your arm straight and lift it up, you find it's very difficult. You can't hold much weight that way. And that's actually at a mechanical disadvantage. A shovel works like that. You know, try to pick up a person. Have a sibling stand on the end of the shovel, and you try to pick them up the way you'd normally use a shovel. It ain't working. No chance. Meanwhile, you could pick that person up with just your hands. So the end of a shovel, though, can go very quickly, kind of like a baseball bat. The end of a baseball bat can move very quickly. You can't hold a lot of weight with it, but there's that quickening of the motion. Anyway, little hints there that'll help you with your lab. So here's the third cost. The third cost is, realistically, there is always friction. And because there's friction, using the machine actually requires a little extra energy or a little extra work that you put in. So in reality, the person taking the ramp actually has to provide more calories, in a sense, to get up there than the person taking the stairs. Of course, there's more friction over the length of that ramp. You're moving over a greater distance. So you'll find there is always this cost of friction. So there are your three costs. Just as a quick review, your benefits of machines: you can redirect the force, you can make the force easier, reduce the force, or you can quicken the motion. But of course, each of those comes with a cost. The cost for all of them is friction. And then if you have mechanical advantage, you got to move over a great distance. If you have mechanical disadvantage, quick motion, you have to provide a great force, greater than the force of even lifting the object itself by hand. Okay, so down here, just a little bit of calculation with this business. We're not going to go through all that. The only thing for you to recognize is like a pulley, for example, is a very common lifting machine. Pulleys can make lifting work much easier for you, or pulling work much easier for you. And if you're interested, I have some advanced work on this. And ask about it, especially those of you interested in college physics. I'll set you up. I'm going to just post it up there. A little advanced work on pulleys. Pulleys are fun to work with. A quick version of a pulley is basically this. If you have a pulley pulling a weight, and here's the magical hand. Oh, there we go. So the hand pulls down and the weight goes up. Here, there's no advantage. This just redirects the force. So you can pull as much as you want, as much rope as you can get. So it can lift the box much higher than you would by hand. So there's the benefit. However, once you start adding pulleys in here, so if you add a pulley in here, instead, this is hooked to a ceiling, and if you run this around this, and then come back down. And I know it looks weird, how can it overlap? But you'll see one way with a compound pulley, the side view of this pulley is like this. There's a pulley, they're next to each other. So they're not actually lean, the ropes are not overlapped. So you have this loop around. Now, this is like a double pulley here. When you pull this, the force required is less. It's pretty cool. However, there's a cost. So this force may cut in half. This may become F over 2. However, there's a cost, and the cost is the distance becomes D over 2. So you pull down 1 meter, this only goes up half meter now. And the truth is, with friction, it actually would go up even less than that. So it's pretty cool. Even the analysis of friction is cool here, because you have to start thinking about ropes. As you put more tension on a rope, it stretches. And so again, the length you get out of it won't be the same as what you're putting in. All this neat stuff. Anyway, in and out, you hear me saying that because in is really how much work the person operating the machine is doing. And out is how much work is happening to the thing being lifted. That's the simplest way to think about it here. All right, so that's enough on this. We don't need to get too crazy. If you do like this machine stuff, I'll show you a couple things in a moment. We got some real nice extra credits down here. This is something that you're looking for a little something to do with your time. Check it out. It's cool stuff. This applies to real life. It's all around you. I'll show you in a second, and we'll go. Actually, let's go right now. If you go over here, simple machines, you look them up. You get a lot of cool stuff. Wikipedia will talk about them, the idea of a simple machine, how they relate. And there are a lot of different ways. You just search up machines. You get all these cool kind of kid links, what these different machines are. Here we go. Machines for kids. Look at all this stuff. The lever, the pulley, the wheel and axle, the plane, the screw, the wedge. Now, one of the extra credits is about, or one of the bonuses is about debating whether these are truly the 6 fundamental machines or there are others. Levers is something you're going to work on in your lab today. There are different classes of lever. Some of them make your work easier. Some of them actually make the work harder. It's still a benefit, though, because it gets quicker. You may have seen things like this, lifting yourself with a pulley. Here's the pulley situation we were talking about before. This sort of thing here. You ever see these guys painting on skyscrapers, or they're washing the windows, these pulley systems. So you can move yourself around. It's pretty neat stuff. And yeah, here's the compound pulleys. Compound pulley problems are fun. You look at something like this. How hard would you have to pull to lift this pail of water? And though the quick answer may be, just the weight of the water. Not really, no. Not you. That's you over here on the right, that hand. Yes, the hook has to match the weight of the water, but if you notice, all along the top there, the ceiling is helping out. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ceiling connections. So those are all helping out, holding the weight. So you're not pulling it all. The ceiling is doing it too. And they're fun math problems to figure out if you're into that stuff. Of course, what's the disadvantage here? You're making the force the advantage easy. The disadvantage, of course. Oh, there we go. The disadvantage, of course, is that this thing will not move up quickly. In fact, go up slowly. The distance will be very small. We have a cool little demo of that in class, but hey, it is what it is. All right, let's go back over here. This one, all right, these other 2 pages, I'm not worried about this. This was a demo we were going to do. It was going to be awesome. You'd be hanging from a thing in the stairwell. Well, if we go back, we'll do it maybe. And then over here, more of the same kind of business. Only thing worth discussing, here's whatever it is. This ramp, by the way, the mechanical advantage up here is the force. It's easier to pull something up a ramp than it is to lift it straight up. The more shallow the ramp, easier the work, but there's always a cost. It's going to be more friction. All right, let's come down over here. This is a nice little summary. When you're using a machine, bigger the displacement, the smaller the force. It feels easy. Of course, the reverse is true. That's mechanical advantage. The smaller the displacement that you actually have to move, the bigger the force you have to provide. This actually feels rough, but it goes quickly, and that's the reason it's a benefit. It goes quickly, and that's called mechanical disadvantage. You'll learn a little about that today.